This is a Get Hired RDH 10-minute training session with your dental hygiene job hunting personal trainer, Doug Perry. And now, here's Coach Perry.
Hey, what is up, everybody? I hope you're having a great week. Thanks for tuning in again with me. This week's training tip is entitled 7 Things to Dump from Your Dental Hygiene Resume. Now, I have to confess, I don't particularly enjoy house cleaning. I think my wife kind of likes it, which is probably why she's a great dental hygienist. But for me, that's not my favorite thing to do. Taking out the trash might be one of those things that I mind the least. So this week I wanted to help you kind of do the same thing with your resume, and I've listed here 7 things that you can dump from your resume, because I think that there are things a lot of dental hygienists have in their resumes right now that just flat out don't need to be there. So the first thing that you want to dump from your resume is the wordiness. You want to write your resume as tight as possible, using as few words as possible to tell your story. Last week I talked to you a little bit about, or actually it was a couple weeks ago, we talked about the white space in your formatting to make sure that you create some of that in there. The more experience that you have, the harder it is to find the white space, and so tight writing can really be of a benefit to you in that regard. It will kind of help create a little bit of extra space, make it look cleaner, and help you to be able to help the reader, the person who is going to see your resume, be able to navigate through it more quickly and more easily. So a bad example might be something like this. I started a new patient program that included an office tour and sit-down meeting with myself and the doctor. We improved patient retention by more than 25%. That's just way too wordy, way too wordy. You can simplify that by just saying really simply, implemented new patient orientation program, elevating retention by 25%. It basically says the exact same thing as the former one, but in half the amount of words. That's one thing that you definitely should purge out of your resume, and I see it in a lot of them, is just way too many words. Keep it simple, keep it short. The next one is to discard all the I's out of your resume. I see a lot of people who put the word I at the beginning of sentences because they're talking about themselves. It's completely unnecessary, and it's much more effective to be a more active style of writing, to just go straight into the verb. So take out the pronoun I and go straight into the verb. For example, you could say, instead of, like in the previous sentence, I mentioned that the person had started it with, I started a new patient program. Much more effective to just say implemented new patient program. Go right into the verb and start all your bullet points that way. There's lots of great word lists out there that give you examples of great verbs to use. So just try to Google that and look up those types of words. Those can be very effective, and that's really what people look for when they're looking at resumes. The next one is to trash the typos. This should go without saying, but it's really shocking, honestly, how many mistakes I see in resumes and typos and various errors, grammatical errors, spelling errors, punctuation errors, these types of things. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I make the mistakes too, but that just calls all the more reason why we have to have someone proofread a resume. You look at something for so long, and after a while you just kind of are buzzing. You just don't spot stuff the things that are wrong with it. And so it's great to do that many times yourself, to proofread it many times yourself. But the best way to make sure that you don't have typos is to have a friend, probably even to look at it for you, or hire a professional person to look at it for you. Make sure that you have no typos. Number 4, throw out the objective statement. As I mentioned last week, most resumes begin with an objective section, is what they call it. And that's just some sort of a ho-hum, vague statement about your career objective. You just want to get rid of that completely, because most of people's objectives is to get a job. So we've kind of established that already. Everybody wants to get a job. It's much, much more effective if you can take that out, relabel it about me, and then put one or two short sentences that are really succinct, that basically spell out what your brand is, what you have to offer, what differentiates you from others, what makes you unique. That's a much, much more effective way to use that little bit of space, and it helps to kind of introduce you as well. So basically ask yourself the question, what do you do for work? And then answer it in 1 to 2 sentences, and that's basically what you need to put into that little section. Number 5 is delete the tasks. Too many hygienists will focus their resume on tasks or things that they've done that all hygienists do. For example, that they took x-rays, or that they do scaling and root planing, or that their primary goal is to educate patients. That's what all hygienists do. You've got to focus on what your results have been, some of your accomplishments, your experiences, your achievements, any kind of specialized training. Take out the tasks that everybody does, because you already know that you do them, and focus on the things that are differentiators. So if you want to say that you do root planing, talk about how good you are at root planing. Talk about how you are unique in your approach to root planing. Just do something in such a way that it makes it as though you are standing out in that area. And then, like I was saying last couple weeks ago, I steer my clients toward a functional type of a resume, because in the functional you have the opportunity to showcase those things that are different right up near the top in its own section. And so you can kind of keep track of those differentiators over the course of your career. Just kind of write them down as you run across them, as you think of them, and then put those into that section. And that will really, really make your resume stand out. It also gives you a good material to prepare you for your interviews, because you have all of a sudden all these experiences and these unique things that you can talk about, that you can bring up in your interview as examples of how great you are. Number 6 is eliminate your mailing address. Now, this is something I've come across fairly recently. But simply put, you really don't need your mailing address in there. That's kind of old school. There's 2 great alternative communication tools that we all use, called the phone and email, that are much faster and much, much more convenient for both you and the employer to use. And then the other reason you don't want to have your mailing address in there is because sometimes some dental offices might use that against you. So, for example, if you've got 2 dental hygienists that are applying for the job and everything else seems to be equal about them, one of them is 10 miles from the office, the other one is 5 miles from the office, some dentists are going to choose the one that's closest, simply because they feel like that's less chance that they're going to have to take a day off of work, or be late, or have some kind of a problem that's going to prevent them from getting to your office. If you're closer, in theory, you're able to get to the office much more easily, and thus be a much more dependable employee. So I think that's a bunch of bunk. I think that a person who's 10 miles away can show up and be just as diligent as a person 5 miles away. It all depends on who the person is and whether or not they are that type of a person, if they're that reliable or not. And so I just said, leave it off. Don't even give them a chance to use that against you, because that's just not something that they really have to know at that stage of the process. And they probably don't even need to know your exact address during the interview stage. So just leave it off. Okay, and then the final one is remove all the extras. Now, aside from your name, your contact information, your about me, your skills, your results, your work history, and your education, most hygienists really don't need to put anything else on their resume. some hygienists tend to want to add those extra things like references or information about licensure and certifications, continuing education classes, awards, recognition, memberships, component participation, published articles, or volunteer service, whether it's related or unrelated. A lot of those things tend to show up on resumes that I see, and it's just really not that necessary unless you're trying to fill up some space. I can see some examples where you have hygienists that have just barely graduated from college. They don't have a whole lot of information to put on their resume, and so that kind of information can kind of help fill it out a little bit so that the page looks like it's a little more full and robust. The other end of it is folks who, or another potential part of it is that some folks who have only who may have been working in the industry for 10 or even sometimes 15 years, but they've only been working in one job, so they don't have a whole lot else to put on there. That's another instance where maybe you might want to put some of these little extra things on your resume, but for the vast majority of hygienists that I've seen, their resumes, they really don't need to have this information on there. It really just takes up more space than you really need to have in it, and it's not necessary. There are certain situations where some hygienists who are extremely accomplished, they've done all these kinds of amazing things in their career, such as research, and they've been leaders in their components and in their associations, and they've done all these different kinds of publications that they've written. That kind of information can go on a website. I think it's very appropriate to put all of that into a .com site that you create for yourself that spells all those details out. It just would fit much better there in some cases than on an actual paper resume. So I just say leave off the extras and go with it from that angle. And that's about it for this week's training tips. So thanks again for tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions or have any feedback for me. I would love to hear from you. And keep on fighting the good fight. Keep on working hard to get that next job. And if there's anything that I can do to help you further, please let me know at any time. Thanks a lot and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Get Hired RDH 10-minute training session. For more information, visit gethiredrdh.com, or you can reach Coach Perry at 801-683-9664 or Doug at gethiredrdh.com.